The French Revolution didn't start with guillotines. It began with debt. Before heads rolled, before mobs stormed the Bastille, before the cries of liberty, equality, fraternity echoed through Paris, the revolution began on paper, in ledgers filled with red ink. The monarchy wasn't overthrown by swords. It was suffocated by numbers. Imagine Paris in 1788. The most powerful kingdom in Europe was bankrupt. The French crown, once a symbol of divine authority, was drowning in debt so deep it couldn't even pay the interest. Gold had vanished from the treasury. Tax collectors squeezed the peasants harder and harder, but nothing could fill the ever-widening gap. And at the center of it all sat Louis XVI, young, uncertain, and trapped in a system that was collapsing under its own weight. For decades, France had been living on borrowed money. Costly wars, extravagant palaces, and national prestige had drained its veins. The 7 Years' War, the expensive alliance with America against Britain. It was all paid for with loans. By the late 18th century, half of France's entire national income went not to soldiers, not to schools, not to bread for the hungry, but to debt payments. The kingdom had mortgaged its future, but France's problem wasn't just overspending. It was inequality, financial, structural, and deliberate. The first estate, the clergy, paid almost nothing in taxes. The second estate, the nobility, paid even less. The entire burden fell on the third estate, which was everyone else. Farmers, shopkeepers, laborers. They were all crushed under taxes they couldn't possibly afford, while the elite bathed in unimaginable luxury. In the countryside, harvests failed. The price of bread, the staple food for most people, tripled. Mothers lined up for hours in front of bakeries that had nothing left to sell. In the cities, rumors spread like wildfire that the rich were hoarding grain, deliberately starving the poor. The economy was dying, literally. And yet, in the Palace of Versailles, the parties continued. The chandeliers glittered, the fountains sparkled, and Marie Antoinette was famously accused of saying, "Let them eat cake." Now, she probably never said that, but the story fit the mood perfectly. Because by then, France had split into two separate worlds, one drowning in gold, the other in hunger. When the king's finance minister, Jacques Necker, published a report on the state's finances in 1781, it was meant to reassure the public. Instead, it became the first spark. The document was filled with half-truths painting a picture of prosperity where there was only ruin. When the real truth leaked out, that the state was completely broke, the illusion shattered. Confidence, the most fragile currency of all, collapsed. By 1789, the royal government had run out of options. Louis XVI called for a meeting of the Estates General, an assembly of representatives from all three social classes, the first one held in 175 years. The hope was reform. The result was rebellion. The Third Estate, tired of being ignored and outvoted, declared itself the National Assembly, the one true voice of France. The economic crisis had just become a political one. And within weeks, that politics turned revolutionary. The Bastille fell not because the people suddenly hated the monarchy, but because hunger and inflation had turned their despair into rage. The streets were filled with the unemployed. A single loaf of bread cost a worker an entire week's wages. Gold had become useless to those who had nothing to buy with it. But here's the twist. When the revolutionaries took power, they faced the exact same problem the monarchy had: money. Running a new government costs more than destroying an old one, so they created their own solution: paper. In December 1789, the National Assembly introduced a new currency called the assignat. It was backed by confiscated church lands, which were sold to fund the revolution, and at first, it worked. People believed in it. Trade revived, wages rose, and a wave of optimism swept the nation. Then came the second twist: temptation. The government started printing more and more assignats to fund wars and welfare programs. Soon, there were far too many notes in circulation and not enough land to back them. Inflation exploded. Prices doubled, then tripled, then went even higher. Merchants began refusing to accept paper money, demanding gold instead. Once again, the currency of belief collapsed. By 1793, the revolution was eating itself. Money had lost all meaning, markets shut down. People reverted to bartering. The government's solution was fear. They passed the law of the maximum, which fixed prices and wages by decree. Anyone caught hoarding goods could be executed. In Paris, Bakers were dragged to the guillotine for speculation. In the name of equality, terror became official policy. Robespierre's government preached virtue but ruled by fear. And the economy, the real foundation of power, continued to crumble beneath them. The assignat's value fell so low that people started using it as wallpaper. A nation that had killed its king to escape bankruptcy found itself bankrupt all over again. Only this time there was no king left to blame. But revolutions, like markets, follow cycles. After chaos comes consolidation. When Napoleon Bonaparte rose to power, he understood what both the revolutionaries and the monarchs had forgotten. Money is trust, and trust must be restored. Napoleon introduced a new stable currency, the franc germinal, tied to gold and silver, and regulated by a new central bank. Confidence returned. Trade revived. The economy stabilized. It wasn't freedom that saved France from ruin, it was financial discipline. And that solid economic foundation allowed Napoleon to build something neither the monarchy nor the revolution could achieve, an empire. And here's the final irony. The same financial forces that had destroyed the old monarchy would now finance Napoleon's wars of conquest. The debt-driven system of kings had given birth to a debt-fueled empire. History had simply changed uniforms. So what are the lessons from France's economic collapse? They echo across centuries. First, no government, no matter how powerful, can survive the loss of trust in its money. When people stop believing their currency has value, no amount of power can save it. Second, inequality, when left unchecked, becomes more than a moral problem. It becomes an economic time bomb. When the majority carries the burden for the few, the system will inevitably explode. Third, printing money only solves a crisis until confidence breaks. Once belief is gone, recovery demands something stronger than promises. It demands proof. And finally, revolutions may begin with emotion, but they always end with economics. Behind every uprising, every cry for freedom, lies a balance sheet written in hunger, debt, and desperation. The French Revolution wasn't born from philosophy. It was born from bankruptcy. The guillotine was just the visible symbol. The real blade was debt. And if history teaches us one truth, it's this. When money dies, order dies with it. From Paris in 1789 to any nation today, the pattern remains the same. An economy built on illusion will, sooner or later, face its reckoning. Because no matter how grand the palace, how loud the slogans, or how glorious the revolution, every empire must eventually answer the same question. What happens when the people's hunger becomes stronger than their fear? Thanks so much for watching. If you found this look at history interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories you might not have learned in school. See you next time.